Hello, Algebra students. I hope that everybody is doing well. We are in section 9-6, day 1 today, and we are talking about the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is not the same thing as a quadratic equation. The quadratic formula helps us solve quadratic equations. And what this is used for is situations like this. Sometimes you cannot solve a quadratic equation by factoring. What should you do when you can't factor the equation? So in other words, sometimes we have messy equations or equations that are not convenient. So when you have equations that are not convenient or kind of messy, we can use the quadratic formula. So what is the quadratic formula? The quadratic formula is right here. It is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, where are those a, b, and c values coming from? They're coming from the equation that we're going to be solving for. So what this is doing, if you cannot solve by factoring, so you're going to use for messy answers. And this is going to calculate the roots still. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right in so we can see this in action. So it says solve using the quadratic formula. Remember, all of these problems are parabolas or quadratic equations, and we're asking ourselves, where does the graph touch the x-axis? So we want to get these all in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. But notice in this first one, it's not in that form. It's not equal to 0. So first, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So now I have x squared minus 2x minus 8 is equal to 0. And I'm just going to identify the a, b, and c. So remember, all of my equations need to be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the a is always in front of the x squared, the b is always in front of the x, and the c is always a constant. So what is the value of a? What number is in front of x squared? 1. So a is equal to 1 here. B is in front of the x term. B is negative 2. C is negative 8. Okay, what we're going to do now, we're going to take these values and whatever they are, we're going to stick them into this original formula. So I'm going to use the formula of the quadratic formula right here in this problem. So I'm going to write that down here just so we have it for reference. This is going to be negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to take these values and substitute them in. So now I have the negative of negative 2, because that's my b value, plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8 all over 2 times 1. Now we want to start simplifying this. So just simplify it a little bit, about halfway, and then we'll use our calculator from there. So we're going to follow order of operations. The negative of negative 2 is positive 2. So I'm just going to carry my work down here. So I got positive 2 plus or minus the square root of. Then I've got negative 2 squared. So that's positive 4. And then I've got negative 4 times 1 times negative 8. Well, negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And negative 4 times negative 8 is positive 32. So plus 32 over 2. All I'm doing is simplifying. So now after that, this becomes 2 plus or minus the square root of 36 all over 2. At this point, 36 is an easy number to take the square root of. So let's go ahead and do that. The square root of 36 is 6. So now I have 2 plus or minus 6 all over 2. we're going to solve both of those equations. So what is 2 plus 6 divided by 2? 2 plus 6 is 8, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So x could equal 4. Or what if it were 2 minus 6? 2 minus 6 is negative 4, divided by 2 is negative 2. So x could equal 4 or negative 2, and those are the roots. So all we've got going on, we're taking our values from our equation, substituting them into the formula, simplifying, and then getting our final result. Okay, let's do that again. I'm going to take these values, figure out what A, B, and C is, and then I'm going to substitute them into the quadratic formula. So where is the A? A is equal to negative 4 here. B is equal to 1, and C is equal to 12. And I'm going to take these values and substitute them into my quadratic formula. So negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Now it's time to substitute in. So instead of writing negative b, I'm going to write negative and then the b value. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So instead of writing b, I'm going to write 1. 1 squared minus 4 times negative 4 times 12. All over 2 times negative 4. So now I want to continue simplifying this. Negative 1 is just negative 1, and I still have plus or minus, the square root of. 1 squared is 1, and then I have negative 4 times negative 4 times 12. Negative 4 times negative 4 times 12. Okay, negative 4 times 4 times negative 12 is equal to negative 192. So, positive, plus 192. All over 2 times negative 4, which is negative 8. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we are going to take this stuff in the square root and simplify it just a little bit more. So now I've got negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 193 over negative 8. Now I'm going to use this, and I'm going to use my calculator for the rest of it. I'm going to use my calculator for this one because the square root of 193 is not an even number. So I'm not going to be able to do it in my head. So here's how we're going to input that into our calculator. So we got our calculator, and I'm going to start up here. So I'm going to have negative 1. And then I'll do the plus first. So I'm going to say plus. And then I need to get the square root symbol in there. So I'm going to hit the second key. And then this button right here, notice it has a little square root above it. Now I've got my square root, and I'm going to put the number 193 in there. And I'm going to get that number. I'm just going to leave it in my calculator, and then I need to divide it by negative 8. So there's my first possible value for x. X could equal approximately negative 1.6. But that was when I took negative 1 plus the square root. What happens when I take negative 1 minus that square root? So let's clear that out and do it again. So I'm going to start with the negative 1. And then I'm going to say minus because I already did the plus portion of this. Now I'm doing minus. And then I'm hitting the second key with my square root symbol, inputting my value, and then clicking equals. Now I'm going to divide that by negative 8. And that's getting me positive 1.9. Approximately. These are approximate answers. And there you have it. So once again, you're substituting your A, B, and C values into this formula, simplifying, and then using your calculator. Let's do 2 more examples. So down here, we need to identify our A, B, and C. A is equal to 1. B is equal to 12, and C is equal to 18. Okay, so we're going to take those values and substitute them into our quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So wherever I see a b, I'm going to replace it with a 12. Wherever I see an a, I'm going to replace it with a 1. And wherever I see a c, I'm going to replace it with an 18. So let's do that first. So I've got negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 18 all over 2 times 1. Now I'm just going to simplify a bit. So this first part is still negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared is 144. And when I take 4 times 1 times 18, I'm getting 72. So this is 144 minus 72 all over 2. But when I take 144 minus 72, I get 72 again. So now I'm at negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 72 all over 2. Now I'm going to take this value and put it in the calculator. So I'm going to say use calculator. So I'm going to take negative 12 plus the square root of 72 and divide it by 2 first. So I'll show you that on here again. So we have, let me clear this out. We've got negative 12 plus the square root of 72. And that equals negative 3.5, but we can't forget to divide it by 2, so I'm leaving a number in there, and then I'm saying divided by 2. And that's getting me about negative 1.8. So x could equal negative, almost forgot that, 1.8. But it could equal something else. What if I take negative 12 minus the square root of 72? All over 2. So once again, I'm putting this into my calculator, so I'm clearing this out. I'm typing negative 12 minus this time, second with the square root key, and then I'm putting my number that's in the square root in there, equals, and then dividing that by 2. And I am getting negative 10.2. And those are my 2 possible values. All right, we're going to do just one more, and then we'll be done with today's note video. So for this one, let's identify our A, B, and C. A is equal to 4, B is equal to 1, and C is equal to 3. When we're substituting these into our formula, I'm just going to write it in this time. So I have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 3 all over 2 times 4. So when we simplify a little bit, I get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 4 times 16 is negative 48, I believe. 4 times 4 times 3 is negative 40, or negative 48, sorry, so minus 48 all over 8. But when I take 1 minus 48, that's negative 47, so I can reduce that a little bit more. I have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 47 all over 8. Now, this is a strange problem because look at what's inside the square root symbol. We've talked about this before in class, but you cannot take the square root of a negative number. Well, at least to get a real solution. When we have the square root of a negative number, and if you were to try to put that into your calculator, so let's just try that real fast. Let's say that I did square root, and then I put negative 47 in there. Domain error. That's because what we're going to have here is something called an imaginary number, but we're not really going to talk about that in this class. So what you need to know is that when you have a negative inside a square root, then that solution is no real solutions. And then that is how we will leave that problem. So our strategy still remained the same. Identify your A, B, and C, substitute them in, and begin simplifying. But for this one, it was just unique because when we tried to simplify it, we had a negative inside of a square root, so it would not simplify further. So we're still following the same strategy per usual. For all of these, we did the same thing. We identified A, B, and C, substituted them into our quadratic formula, and then we simplified and used our calculator. And remember, these are the roots or where the graph crosses the x-axis. That's all for today's video lesson. I hope you have a great night.